Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on the 7 Habits of Highly Successful Communication Managers, starring habit number 3, Putting First Things First. Today, our presenter will be Doug Tolley. Thank you very much for joining us.
I don't know how many of you have been here before with us or not, but thank you for being here. One of the key problems that we find as we've gone around the country and talked to a lot of individuals who work in IT departments and are in charge of unified communications implementations and are working with their telecom departments and their IT departments is that there's a fundamental problem that most, 80% according to Gartner, enterprise investments of UC component projects will not be governed by an overall or overarching UC strategy and roadmap. And that seems shocking. But as you think about your daily activities, what you have to do, the things that are most critical in your world, it's interesting how many times things come up that sort of take our focus or distract us from what we want to do or kind of are driven by management or other people's priorities and not necessarily our own. And so as I look at that statistic, I think if 80% of what goes on in our day is not driven by an overarching strategy or roadmap, then how do we combat that? How do we make sure that we're doing what we need to do, when we need to do it, and how we need to do it? And as a basis and a framework for our discussion today, I think we all understand that the communication ecosystem is really a complex beast. It's got all kinds of moving parts and pieces that all have to talk to each other in a way that would be seamless, supposedly, although I say that in air quotes, supposedly, and in a way where all of the pieces and parts work together and tie together in a perfectly integrated fashion. Of course, that's the ideal world. And the biggest problem that we find as we talk with IT managers all over the place is that all of this runs on the same very limited important component, and that is our bandwidth. In other words, all of these things, video conference, audio conference, screen sharing, desktop collaboration, whiteboard sessions, all of those things are all competing for that one very scarce resource, which is our bandwidth. And we see you as those people who are trying to hold up this bandwidth and make it all work. But at the end of the day, as we add various components like mobility, maybe teleconferencing, web presence, like we said, IM, chat sessions, certainly video and all those other components. At some point, the IT infrastructure, the underlying bandwidth, just can't support all of the additions that are ultimately going to be competing. And certainly things that compete with voice are going to affect voice quality. And so as we talked about in the previous session, one of the primary goals is to be proactive, to not let all of those things pile up onto the network until ultimately it results in a failure. Part of that, though, dovetails into what I talked about in the very beginning, which was how do we balance our daily activities between putting out the fires that come up, and those interruptions inevitably do come in our day, and balancing that with strategy, knowing where we want to go and doing the things that are taking us towards our individual, our department, and our overall company strategic goals. The second thing that really plays a critical component in us determining what we do need to do and when we need to do it is habit number 2, and again, all of this stolen lovingly from Dr. Covey's work, which is beginning with the end in mind. That statistic of 80% of all UC projects are done without an overarching or overall strategy in mind. And so if we know where it is we want to go, that really helps in us determining if today's tasks or today's fires are taking us towards our goals or away from our goals. And I think in one of our blog posts we talked a little bit about that idea that came from the work of in Alice in Wonderland, where the Cheshire Cat asks Alice where she wants to go, and she says she really doesn't know, and then he says, well, then it really doesn't matter what road you take. So if we don't know where we're headed, it ultimately doesn't matter what road we take. And then as we think about those first 2 concepts of being proactive not reactive and waiting for things to happen to us, and knowing where it is that we want to go, then the question is, in our daily activities, how do we make sure that we're putting first things first? How are we making sure that we do the most important things? And so today's topic, as we talked for a couple of minutes here today about that, is this idea that inputs come into our day all day long. And many of those inputs are not necessarily ones that we've wanted. In other words, employees come to our door and have a question about something. We have all kinds of other interruptions all day long, like we might be sitting down to do our email for the day and say, okay, I'm going to carve out an hour and I'm going to finish up my email and get everything done. And in the course of that hour, even your own brain sort of sabotages you, because while you're sitting there thinking about doing your email, perhaps something will pop in your head like, oh yeah, I forgot to call my sister for her birthday. Did I make those travel arrangements to go to Dallas? Have we put out the fourth quarter or third quarter numbers yet? What's the sales target for my team? And all of those things that ultimately sound like distractions get entered into not only into our mind, but into our day. As we try to do, even if we're trying to be proactive, we have all of these distractions, interruptions. And so the trick is to figure out how to quickly triage all of those interruptions, determine which ones are the most important, make sure we're concentrating on the things that are most important, and lay everything else to the side. The only way that we found over time and working with a lot of our customers and clients and partners and business consulting and others is that you have to have a system that you 100% trust. And what I mean by that is that as these distractions and interruptions come into your mind or into your day, you have to jot them down. Maybe that's in an electronic device like Evernote or OmniFocus or OneNote, some sort of, it could be a notebook, like a moleskin notebook. It could be a set of 3x5 cards, which I've seen used effectively. It could be a legal pad. In some way, you have to take those inputs, put them down in some place that you trust that you'll get back to later, and then let that distraction go from your mind so you can focus on the things that are most important at the time. Now, a lot of that concept comes from David Allen's book called Getting Things Done, which we would highly recommend that everybody get. Again, his name's David Allen, and the book's called Getting Things Done. And I reference that in one of our blog posts. You can find that on our website. But he talks about this idea then that the graphic that you see is called mind like water. In other words, as a distraction or an input, we shouldn't call them distractions, but as it comes into our day, how much weight and responsibility and effort and diversion from what we're currently doing do we give this thing? His basic concept is if it's something you can do in 2 minutes or less, you should do it so your mind can be free of that distraction and get back to the task at hand. If it's something that takes longer than 2 minutes, then you have to note it down, write it down, put it in your electronic system or whatever, and then trust yourself that you'll get back to it a little bit later as you go back and review what's next. And so this idea kind of comes again from the physics principle called the Archimedes principle. If you remember Archimedes, he's the guy who sat in a pool of water and determined that his weight displaced exactly, so if he weighed 200 pounds, he displaced exactly 200 pounds. And so as you look at those things that come into our day, what's the weight of them? How important are they in my daily activities? What do I need to do next? And is it important enough that I stop the thing I'm currently doing and move on to the thing that's next? And so as I look at my day, I have to sometimes prioritize those. So two concepts to sort of dovetail together then. The idea of triaging these activities. Is it the most important thing that I should do right now? If it is, I do it. If it's not, and I lay it aside, and then make sure I get back to that. And so I think as I look at that, the things that are dropped into my day, like a rock being dropped into the water, is my response proportional to the weight of the task, the importance of the interruption, the importance of that distraction, project, disappointment, or success. And so these three concepts really are all about a self-directed change or a paradigm shift, that we're no longer going to wait for what comes up, but we're going to be proactive about determining whether we're working on strategy or putting out fires on a daily basis, that we are going to begin with the end in mind so that we know where we're headed and that we're not just taking the path of least resistance, or maybe we're worrying about the squeaky wheel always getting the grease, or worrying about the things that maybe don't take us towards our overarching UC strategy. And then 3, as we combine those two things, we find that then as we prioritize what comes up, that we're able to put the first things first and make sure that we're really working on what is most critical on a daily, hourly, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis. And these 3 concepts together, again, the idea lovingly stolen from Stephen Covey's work on the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. These first 3 together are that paradigm shift within ourselves that help us understand how we can be more self-directed in doing what's most important right now. And so I'll give you a quick example as we kind of tie all of these together. We're currently working through one of our partners with an organization that was having a terrible conferencing problem. They didn't have enough trunks, they didn't have enough lines, people were calling in and getting busy signals, particularly, as you all know, because we're all in the same boat. Very often that would be the executives who call in and can't seem to connect while everybody else is doing fine. So they're screaming the loudest, hey, this conferencing system stinks, it never works, it doesn't do what we need to do. We were helping this group implement a new conferencing system with Microsoft Link, and we got all the way down to the finish line, and we could actually see the end of the project. We were very excited. There it was. We were going to finish the last few steps of implementation, and then suddenly someone asked a question about virtual IP addresses as opposed to regular IP addresses. And all of a sudden we lost complete sight of the project, rewrote all the firewall rules, and spent the next month going down a path that had no benefit towards the ultimate goal, which was to solve this conferencing problem. Now, there may have been some security concerns and other things that could have been addressed in a day or 2, but ultimately it took us about a month away from the project. And when we talked, as this research went on and these other possibilities and all the other things, at the end of it all, as we talked to the management and they said, how did we get so far off track? We looked back and basically the reason why the project got off track was because as a distraction about virtual IP addresses came up, people weren't proactive about deciding what was and wasn't important to do in that moment. We lost sight in that project about beginning with the end in mind, which ultimately the end was to solve the conferencing problem. And then as we went down this educational road, as I'll call it, to satisfy a couple of people's curiosity, we lost sight of the ability of just putting first things first, which was really about making sure that executives, when they called in, didn't get busy signals and were able to solve that problem. And so it really becomes a matter of, again, a self-directed set of change. I'm going to change myself. I'm going to change my department. I'm going to change our division. We're going to do things proactively with strategy and make sure that what we're working on is always the most important thing at the time. And those, again, first 3 concepts, those first 3 habits from Stephen Covey's work are all about how I can change and affect those around me. The next set of habits that we're going to talk about in our next set of seminars is really about how we work with others. And that first one is always make things a win-win. Certainly that's important for all of us to make sure that there aren't any losers in these situations, but that we make every situation we enter in a win-win situation. We're excited about talking about that next time. And certainly we have more information about each of these topics on our website at vxsuite.com. If you click at the top of the page, the What's Up button, you can get to some blog posts and other things that we've done to write a little bit about this. You can find us on Twitter at vxsuite.com, and my personal Twitter handle is at Tali Lama.
Our next conference will be June 25th on the Win-Win, so you can keep an eye out for that, and we'll be sending out more social media and emails about that as well.